What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast, and our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today we're joined by Greg Chaisson, bass player, probably best known for his time in Badlands with Jakey Lee, Ray Gillen, and Eric Singer, and Jeff Martin eventually. Also has a project called Atomic Kings, his new band. Just put out an album. You can find that record on tonehouserecords.com. Co-owned by Jeff Duncan from Armored Saint. So there's a little bit of an Armored Saint connection.
Yeah, the head guy is Jason Constantine. He sent us the record. Here's the backstory. I was contacted by Jeff Duncan, told me about his label. Says Greg Chaisson's new band, Atomic Kings, has a record out, and we love your podcast here at the label, and what can you do? And I was like, of course, I love Greg, and anything we do. They sent us the record. What do you think about the record?
I love it, man. It's everything it's billed as. It takes all the best elements of classic 70s hard rock bands. I hear UFO, I hear Leonard Skinner, I hear Led Zeppelin, I hear Grand Funk.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's really cool. I would say that if you liked Badlands, you're going to love Atomic Kings. They're sort of in that same 70s bluesy, soulful type of genre, I guess, if I had to put a label on it. But yeah, I loved it. I'm glad they've sent it to us.
Yeah.
I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, good. It's a good, strong, hard rock record that has some folks in it that you've probably heard the names of. And that's of course, the reason I wanted to is because I love Greg and I love old Badlands, the first Badlands record. And Greg's a legend.
We should mention Surgical Steel.
I freaked out on the things that I learned today just by hanging out with Greg. We talk about his brothers in this episode. His brothers are Todd and Kenny, who have also toured the world and bona fide rock stars in their own right. All bass.
Yeah.
Greg Chaisson. They should just change their last name to Chaisson because it's on. The bass is fucking on.
Three brothers that play bass, and
it's crazy.
All have done records and
toured the world and kind of lived the dream, so to speak.
Yeah,
and on many different levels. And Todd probably being the longest running in the band Tough, but at the same time, I also wanted to bring up the three Duncan brothers, and you got three Duncans and three Chaissons, but in the Duncans, you have a bass player, a drummer, and a guitar player.
Yeah.
The Chaissons, I think, I can see it like the Three Stooges. Well, I thought you were going to play guitar. No, I'm going to play bass. I thought you told me you were going to play guitar because I'm going to play bass. And then Todd gets home from school. What are you guys doing with my bass? Oh, well, I'm going to play bass. No, that's my bass. You can't play bass. It's like, who's on first? It's like, no, who's on bass?
Yeah.
And all three guys, three hands go up.
It's like they decide to start a band and they all come home with a bass. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a big bottoms joke in their household when they get together for holidays and shit. But anyway, it was great hanging with him today. Atomic Kings, as well as we talk about his history, about growing up there, out west and going further out west in the early 80s to kind of get plugged in and learn a lot about himself and about rock and roll. And he's really kind of hung out with a lot of sort of music business royalty, it sounds like. You got the good and the bad and the ugly, and we kind of covered it all with Greg today.
That's the nature of the business. I learned a lot. Obviously, he's probably best known, of course, for his time in Badlands, but I wasn't aware of the duration of time that he spent with Steeler, Legs Diamond. Of course, I knew about Surgical Steel. He was in Ratt for 15 minutes, apparently, in his own words.
Yeah.
So, he's done a lot. And Atomic Kings is his latest project. It sounds great, classic 70s hard rock sound. And He was just a great talker, man. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. For you guys who, like boots, you got to see this episode. If you like
Yes.
boots, if you
Yes.
like really cool, collectible, antique, custom-made leather cowboy boots, you must see this episode. Here,
Yeah.
Greg Chaisson on the Talk Louder podcast. Greg has his boot collection behind him, Dave. You see that shit?
I see that, man. How many pairs of boots? How many pairs of boots do you have, Greg?
About 130. That's just a smattering of them behind me.
I was going to say it looks like 120 right there behind you. So
there's a closet over here that's full of them, and behind on this other wall over here is a bunch, and there's another room that has some. I go to Cowboy Boots Anonymous.
Nice. Have you ever
what's the most money you've ever spent on a pair of boots?
I've had a couple of custom pair made that are in the $1,200 price range, but I find a lot at antique stores and high-end resale stores. For really nice boots, I've paid as low as $40.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it all balances out somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, going to El Paso, those outlet stores down there.
We were just there.
Oh, really?
That's why we were there. Is there's a guy there that named Francisco Mendoza that custom makes boots. So we went down there, my wife and I, and I ordered a couple pairs from him, and then I also had a couple pairs that were too big, and he does something that's called relasting, where he basically does a measurement of your foot, takes the boot apart, and rebuilds it to your foot size.
Wow.
I'm over here barefoot. I feel underdressed all of a sudden.
Well, we were talking before I hit record. We were talking about all kinds of stuff, and I was telling Greg if he kind of recalled me and the toys. We wore boots daily on the road.
So did I.
Yeah. every day. And
I had the whole cowboy hat thing going on anyway. I should actually live in Texas, because then I could just talk like this and I would sound just like I came from Waco or something.
Yeah.
If I lived in Texas, I'd pick that up in about a week, and that's exactly what I would sound like.
Yeah, that's
same
fine.
thing in Scotland. I'd end up sounding like I was from Scotland.
Well, there's still Western wear stores all over the place in every metropolis.
Oh yeah.
So
El Paso is the biggest custom boot making capital of United States.
Yeah.
And so there's more boot makers in El Paso than anywhere else, probably because of the really close proximity to El Paso. I mean, to Juarez.
Yeah.
But so that's one of the reasons we went, and we looked at a bunch of different custom makers there. There's probably 25 custom makers there. And there's a guy in Tucson that I go to named Esteban Ozuna, and he custom makes boots, and he's making me some as well. So I get around with it, and I don't go to strip bars. So
right. You were saying earlier, if you don't mind me recapping that, you said it's better than drugs.
It's better than drugs. I don't do drugs. I don't drink.
Yeah.
And I don't go to nudie bars. I just collect boots.
Yeah. That's smart. Smart. It's an investment. Yeah. You're not just flushing it like drugs and nudie bars.
Well, I have a pair. I just sold a pair. I sold 3 pairs this week, and I got a pair going out tomorrow. And because sometimes I'll buy them on eBay and they won't exactly fit exactly right. So I just turn around and sell them. And like I said, I got a pair I'm giving to my son when he comes over today. He's got about 20 pairs. My wife's got about a dozen. My daughter's got probably a dozen.
Wow.
We have a problem.
Yeah. Sounds like a pretty cool problem.
It
sounds like
we enjoy it.
It sounds like a reality TV show series, hoarders, but for boots.
Yeah.
Boot hoarders.
But look how organized.
Boot hoarders. Boot hoarders.
I belong to a group on Facebook called Cowboy Boot Collectors, and there's like 31,000 members on it.
Okay.
And there's guys on there that probably have 300 pairs of boots.
Okay.
And there's a lot of guys, all they have are really custom made boots. And there's a number of vintage makers, guys that are no longer around. And so if you're in the boot community, if someone says, "Oh yeah, I got a pair of Paul Bond boots," everyone goes, "Whoa, that's like you just found an old Ferrari or something."
Wow.
So I just found a '58 Les Paul. I just found a pair of Paul Bonds. So, and there's other guys like that, and it's kind of a fun community to be part of because everyone's always showing their boots and selling and trading. And like I said, I sold 3 pairs of boots on there this week.
Wow. Yeah, you're paying it forward a little bit. Every time we rolled, we were headed west or coming back east, back down to Texas or something, we would pull that bus over and stop in like Justin or whatever, one of those big side of the road, giant boot,
Cowtown is there.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of us would walk in and walk out with a pair of boots. So
when we were in Badlands, we had to stop in El Paso whether anyone else wanted to stop or not. So I'd go into the Tony Lama outlet store or Cowtown or whatever, and I'd get a pair of boots and I'd come in the bus and they'd go, "Are you done yet?" Yeah. And then we'd move as long as Chaisson got his boots. So.
Well, let's talk about Atomic Kings. You have this, how long has this group been around?
About 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Right after COVID. So right after COVID hit on March, whatever it was, me and the guitar player Ryan McKay and the drummer Jimmy Taft were in another band. We fired our singer that we had, and we got a new singer, Ken Ronk. And then shortly thereafter, like maybe in a month, we changed the name of what the original band was to Atomic Kings. So that's kind of the actual formation of that band was about a month after COVID.
Okay. And, who's the main songwriters and kind of go deep on it? How did it really come about? Right after COVID, you guys were out somewhere, or did you get a phone call or hear some songs?
Right after COVID, we had just put a record out in this other band that we were in.
Okay.
And we were supposed to go do some shows, but COVID hit. And then we realized we weren't going to be able to do any shows. Along the way, we decided to write new songs for this other band called Kings of Dust. I don't want to dance around it too much. Okay. And really short into the period of writing new material, we realized that we had kind of outgrown the singer. The style that he was kind of trying to do didn't really fit anymore with the direction we were going on. We were getting a little bluesier, a little funkier, a little more soulful sort of thing. We were kind of going off in a even more 70s direction than we had been in previously. And so we decided that it would be, a good time since we couldn't do any live shows and we weren't happy with what was being brought to the table from a vocal lyrical content, we decided to part companies with that singer. And then we got Ken, who is like a local legend here. He's the guy, and arguably the best rock style for that kind of blues rock. Paul Rodgers, Zeppelin, that sort of thing. Greg Allman, he has that kind of voice, and so we brought him into the band. He immediately started writing to the material that we already had without hearing what the previous singer had brought to the table. We just said, here's a couple songs. What can you do? And right out of the box, it was like, oh, that's what this is supposed to sound like. So we knew we had found our guy, and then the writing process progressed. And then the record's been out about, 2 months, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But the writing process is usually either me or Ryan will come up with a couple of ideas, a riff, a verse, a chorus, whatever. And then I'll play it for Ryan and he'll add to it, or he'll play me what he has, and then I'll add to it. We get kind of a very loose arrangement of what we're going to do. We take it to rehearsal. Then Jimmy gets to kind of interpret it the way that he feels it should be done. Ken starts writing melody line and lyrics right from the get-go. The thing I like about Ken, he's a lot like Ray Gillen was in Badlands. Ray would, Jake and I could be just screwing around on some riff that Jake had, and Ray's already writing lyrics and melody lines.
Yeah.
And he's already coming up with stuff, and we're going, well, we're just messing around. Oh, I really like it. Ray always liked everything that we came up with, or Jake came up with. Ken likes everything that me and Ryan kind of come up with. And so even if it's just us messing around, he's like, oh, we should do something with that. Yeah. So it's a really good problem to have as a singer that sings right from the get-go. The problem with the other singers, we never knew what he was coming up with till almost we were in the studio. And then when we would kind of get there, we'd be like, I don't know. Can we change a little? I'm not sure. So when we were doing it right before we parted company, we were recording it and listening back to it like the work tapes. And we were like, I don't know. And so it kind of ended up like that. Yeah. So now it works really good because Ken's in right from the get-go. Jimmy is in right from the get-go. And so in the end, it ends up being written by all of us. But the originating idea is normally coming from Ryan or myself. Now, the caveat to that is there's a song on our record called Jimmy's Page, a little play on words there. Right. And Jimmy, the drummer, wrote that. And actually, he even played the acoustic guitar on the record for it. So he's a capable writer as well. There's another song called Running Away that started out Jimmy just playing some drum beat, and we liked it, and Ryan added to it, then I added to it, and then we all added to it and morphed it into a song. So we're never sure where it's going to come from. It could be just, I'll give you even a better example. We were doing a show in March here, and the guy wanted me to just play some simple noise on my bass for sound check. So I started playing this kind of crazy thing in E, between all the different spots you can play E on the bass for the sound check. And as we were doing it, I was looking at the people out in the audience, and they were all bopping their heads to what I was doing. And I thought, maybe I'll try to make something out of this. So I took it home, wrote some stuff, showed it to Ryan. He wrote some stuff to it, and boom, it's going to be our opening song when we start playing here again in July. Wow. And it's based out of just us fooling around in soundcheck. So
yeah, I love it when that happens.
It's kind of a cool thing. It's kind of a gift. I mean, it's like, because you know how hard people sit there and they'll have songwriting sessions. I always find that amusing. Okay, we're going to get together on Thursday. Every Thursday we get together. We're going to write a song. We're going to come up with something. I'd be like, are you insane? I can't write that way. If I need to write, if I need a riff, I just hop in the shower, and while I'm washing my hair, I'm going, oh, and then I get out of the shower and I get my bass, and okay, got a riff right here. So. Yeah,
the best shit is going to come from when you're not thinking about it. You're disconnected. That way, it's like real and juicy and makes sense that way.
I got to have almost something else going on besides it, so I can not really be so focused on, trying to get every nuance of whatever it is that's in my head down, because I don't write on the bass, I write in my head. So I'll work it out in my head. And Ryan always says it's really funny because I have like a 24-track studio in my head, and I'll write down, I'll get all my parts sorted out, and Ryan will say, do you have it on tape? No, it's all right in here. And then I just show it to him, and he's always amazed that I can remember all of it. How can you remember all that? Because I'll have the whole arrangement that I want to use, and then once the song is written, then I'll take it home, and there's a tape copy somewhere, but I don't ever listen to it. And they listen to it, but I go home and I just play it back in my head, and then I do a lot of the arranging for what we do. Okay. And I start picking parts out of here or there or whatever, and then Ryan will come in, will get involved, say, I'm thinking this, and he'll go, yeah, that's cool. How about a little more of this? Or Jimmy will say, what about if it had this? And so it really ends up being a group effort. Yeah. And I'm happy with it that way. I like to have someone to work off.
I think that there is the gift is the vision that an artist might have. Doesn't have to be recorded or on paper or anything until you have to show it to a group of people so you can perform it or record it. And it's very well documented. Now, people might argue with me, but there's other rock artists, and this is the part where people might argue with me. James Brown and Michael Jackson didn't ever play instruments, but they could write songs. And then when it came down to like, okay, here's the bass line, and they'd sit right there with the bass player and, you know, beatbox out the bass line, and they wouldn't leave that dude's face until he played it right. Yep, you got it 30 minutes later, right? They move on to the piano player. Here's your piano part. They're singing these parts. They go down the line. Michael would go into the studio and just, okay, give me another track. He'd beatbox the drums. He'd beatbox the you know, just sing it. He'd sing all the parts, and he'd have 20 tracks of different instrument. Okay, here's the violin part, you know, and he would write songs that way, and he didn't play an instrument. So
it's not common.
No, it's not uncommon. It's actually beautiful art.
So are you based out of Phoenix, Greg?
Yeah, I live in Phoenix.
So Atomic Kings is basically a Phoenix-based band.
Yeah.
So the album, how long has the album been out?
Around 6 weeks, I think.
Okay. And it's self-titled?
Yeah, it's just called Atomic Kings.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Front, back.
Yeah.
Nice. So how would you describe this music to someone that's not familiar? I've listened to the tracks. I have, you know, I hear echoes of certain things. How would you describe it?
Echoes of certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say that, you know, not only do we wear our influences on our sleeve, we actually celebrate them. We don't hide from them. So if you got something out of that sounded a little like Trapeze or a little like Zeppelin or Bad Company or Humble Pie or Grand Funk, you're probably right, or you're at least in the neighborhood. It's like everything. To me, it's everything I liked about the 70s with a little bit of a twist to it. So a good example would be the lead single off the record is called All I Want. I actually wrote that song in the 70s. So I wrote that song in like 1978, and I wrote the way that you hear it on the record is fairly close to how I wrote it. And at one point, I even showed it to Ray, and he wasn't interested in it. And I tried to get it on the Kings of Dust record, and the singer wasn't interested in it. And so when we started the Atomic Kings part of it, I said, look, I know that this has kind of been discounted, but I want to actually try to put it on the record. And so we put it together. It's the first song we actually wrote and arranged and everything for the record. And it came out, you know, I'm happy with how it came out. It's, you know, one of my more favorite tracks on the record, but then they all are. So it's really kind of not fair to say.
You held on to that one for a little bit.
I did. I just really, it's one of those kind of riffs that you get in your head and like a couple of years would go by and I wouldn't have been thinking about it at all. And then I'd be like humming something and I'd be, what is that? Oh, that's that thing I wrote way back when.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting that this long of a time has passed, and to finally have the song come to fruition and to sound as good as it does is kind of the vision I had in my head. So what Jimmy does is exactly what I would have wanted to hear on the drums. Same with Ryan on guitar and Ken on vocals, and even he added the harmonica. Ken's an actually really good harp player, and it ended up being like a really good song, you know, and the response to it has been very good as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was going to ask you about Jimmy's page, because you alluded to that earlier, and there is a play on words, and Jimmy spelled Jimi, as in Jimi Hendrix. And of course, we all know who the page is. I hear the Rain song from Zeppelin when I hear that. And then I hear some, on the second track, I heard some Leonard Skinner, some Mr. Saturday Night Special or something like that.
Oh, possibly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like you said, it's got all the best elements of all the great vintage classic 70s rock bands.
Well, if you like listen to All I Want, the chorus of it is basically a turned around version of I Don't Need No Doctor.
Yeah. There you go.
Or Up Our Sleeves off Humble Pie. I forget the name of the record now. So there's a lot of that. There's a song on there called I Got Mine, and it's not really, there's no specific trapeze song that I was thinking of, but I wanted something that had kind of a trapeze funk thing to it. And so when I I would go listen to some trapeze and go, okay. And then I'd go and fool with it. And there's not a direct rip off of anything, but the vibe of it is very similar to that. You know, Ryan will write a lot of, like, he's really into like Mott the Hoople and Sensational Alex Harvey Band and Slade and all that kind of stuff, kind of that pop, glammy pop sort of thing. He was in a band called Crash Street Kids in the early 2000s. They made 4 records, and it was very much that British glam sort of thing. And so he kind of brings that to the table. And so, and I'm familiar with that genre. So when we're putting our stuff together, I can hear where he got his influences. He can usually hear where I got mine. But by the time we put it together, it sounds, there's just kind of a taste of whatever it started out as, and it ends up being what it ends up.
Yeah. And there's an Armored Saint connection, correct? Jeff
Yes,
Duncan?
Jeff
Okay,
Duncan.
tell us about that.
Well, when we were getting ready to record the record or trying to figure out where we were going to record it, because the previous singer owned a studio, and so when we fired him, we knew we weren't going to his studio. So we were actually looking.
You think?
I think he was mad.
Damn it! Wait, mad because you guys weren't going to come record in his studio, or mad? Never mind.
Well, let me put it this way: he sued us. If that gives you an idea how mad he was, he sued us for the name. He said you can't use the name Kings of Dust, and if you do, you have to give me $35,000. And we said, well, we were thinking of changing the name anyway, so bite me. And there you go. And so,
you know, shit happens.
By the way, I love the name Atomic Kings. I thought that's a great band name.
It's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the Armored Saint connection.
Well, through another guy, I met Jason Constantine, who's part owner of Tone House Records with Jeff Duncan. And him and I were just trading messages. And I said, hey, you got a label, I got a band. We're kind of looking for a home here. Would you be interested? And he said, oddly enough, I was just talking to Jeff Duncan about you and Atomic Kings, and I was going to approach you to see if you were interested in doing that. So we met with him. He sent us some files. I mean, Jeff is kind of the silent partner in that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've known Jeff since the Armored Saint days because I was in a band in LA called Steeler. And I don't think we ever did a show together, but we were on the scene at the same time. So he was aware of Steeler, and I was obviously aware. I'm
sorry. You had me at Steeler. How long were you in Steeler?
About a year and a half, and it was the last version. So it was. Oh, okay. There was the original version that came to from Nashville to LA that Ron eventually jettisoned all of that, and then he got the version with Yngwie and Rick Fox and Mark Edwards. Okay. Then he had another version with Mitch Perry, and I forget the bass player's name, sorry, and Mark Edwards, and then that went south, and then he put together the final version, which was me, Bobby Marks, and I can't remember the guitar player's name now, but sorry. And that's all right. That was, so it was about a year and a half of that. Of that band. The cool thing is I had been kicked out of my band here in Phoenix, which was Surgical Steel. And
wow, holy shit! Hold the phone. How long were you in Surgical Steel?
Yeah,
I actually started it. It's my name, so I came up with the
Christ.
name.
Go ahead. Do you still have a PO box that I can write fan mail to? Because, dude.
Well, I can tell you an interesting thing that. There's a Surgical Steel record. They're signing with some, I forget the name of the label, Blue something label. And they're going to re-release or finally release a Surgical Steel album. And some of it is some of the later material that after I had been unfairly kicked out. And then some stuff that I also helped write. There's a song called Rivet Head, another song called White Revenge, Officer Steel, that I was in the band and I co-wrote that stuff.
I'm very familiar with Rivet Head.
Yeah, Rivet Head is the first song we ever wrote, and Jim Keeler and I, the guitarist, wrote the song in his living room, and we had the music, and we started writing the lyrics, and we wrote the lyrics kind of as a tongue-in-cheek. joke. We were cracking up when we were writing it. And we decided to keep it that way. At the time, a friend of mine turned me on to Brian Slagle at Metal Blade, and we sent him a tape with 4 songs on it, and he loved Rivethead, and he put it on Metal Massacre too. So it's arguably the most,
which I have.
Yeah, I mean,
yep.
And by the time that came out, I had already been kicked out. So that record was coming out. They had a new bass player, a guy named Mark Lehman, God rest his soul, and I was in LA. So Surgical Steel was playing they were renting like bingo halls and playing out in the desert and renting an ice skating rink and doing a show. I go to LA. First band I got in, I was in Ratt for about 15 minutes. And while Juan was still deciding whether he wanted to be in Dokken or Ratt. So I went and auditioned for Ratt, got the gig, with the caveat being that if Juan decides anytime before the record's done that he wants to be back in the band, he would be back in the band. But I thought, yeah, I'll roll the dice on it. I ended up becoming, good friends with those guys. I mean, Blotzer was one of my best friends. Robin Crosby was actually one of my first friends in LA.
Wow.
And so I know that, I know Warren and Steven and all that, and I'm cool with those guys. So that ended up, I got pneumonia very shortly into the band. We'd only rehearsed like 3 or 4 times, and I wasn't used to living by the ocean. I'm from Arizona.
Yeah.
So now I live by the ocean. It was a real wet winter. I got really sick, and they had a show coming up, so they had to get a bass player, and I couldn't do it. So they got another guy named Joey Chris. They ended up keeping him, and then right at the last minute, Juan decides he wants to come back. Joey Chris ends up out getting shown the door, and the record comes out, and so I felt bad for Joey. And to be honest, I probably would have been pretty pissed off if the record was going to come out and now I'm out of the band. So it's probably a good thing that happened. Then I played for a short time in Legs Diamond.
Yeah. Wow. You are checking all the boxes, my man.
Yeah.
You're I already thought you were kick ass, and now you're like through the roof, bro.
Well, Legs Diamond is like, especially like in San Antonio and some of those towns, is like Zeppelin.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
from San Antonio.
We are well aware of Legs Diamond's
Lead Diamond.
Led Zeppelin.
Lead Diamond, yeah.
Legs
Zeppelin.
And I knew who they were. I had a couple of their albums. So they had an ad in a local paper called The Recycler, I think is what it's called in LA. And everyone would advertise. I think that's how Mick Mars got in Motley Crue. And I think
it's how Lars met James.
I think so.
Yeah.
And so I answered their ad, went and auditioned for them, and I got the gig. And the reason they were looking for bass players, they were going to do like 12, 15 shows in Texas. So I had never actually went on a real tour. So, we went to Texas and did these shows, and I was stunned at how big they were. All the shows were sold out. We headlined some outdoor festival somewhere in Texas, and I was having a great time. The band was cool. And so, I mean, I got kicked out of Surgical Steel, and now I'm on tour in Legs Diamond, who is, a known entity. And, they're trying to get a record deal, which inevitably never happened. And then what happened is I came back after the tour, and for some inexplicable reason, Legs Diamond couldn't play in LA. They couldn't, no one would book them. I don't know why. And I got a call from Bobby Marks, who I knew, the drummer in Steeler, about Ron putting together a new Steeler, and did I want to come down and audition? I said, I don't want to audition. At the time, I'd seen Steeler, and it didn't do anything for me. And I thought, nah. And so I went to audition. I went to he said, can you come down and help us audition guitarists? I said, yeah, sure. I said, yeah, for $100. They said, yeah, we'll pay you $100. So I went down there and helped them audition 3 or 4 guitarists, including the guy that got the gig. And along the way, though, of this long day of rehearsing with Ron, I kind of could see the method to his madness. I kind of saw what his work ethic is like. And he rehearsed, even when he was auditioning, it was like a show. He was doing his stage act, and he was doing his raps, and he was kind of checking what the guitar player would do in a live situation before it was a live situation. he had a drum riser set up in the back that the drummer's on, and it was like a real deal. And I went, this could actually be pretty cool. So after Ron took me to dinner, and he said, I really want you to be in the band. And I said, well, I don't really play like anyone else. I mean, I'm not like a bass player that just stands there and thumps along or E and A and maybe sings a background vocal. I'm Tim Bogert. I'm John Entwistle. I want to be those guys. I'm Geezer. I want to be able to do, that's what I grew up with. Those are my influences along with 20 other guys. And that's how I play. And I'm not willing to dumb that down for any amount of money. And Ron said, no, that's what I want. And Ron actually said, I had Yngwie on guitar. Now I want Yngwie on bass, which I thought was very flattering. And do I agree with that? No, but it was flattering. And I thought, okay, as long as you understand. And I said, and I write, and I want to be able to write. He said, oh, I definitely want that. And I said, and I want $100 every show, because everyone lived in this crappy movie theater in a really crappy part of LA they called the Steeler Mansion, except Ron, of course, he lived by the beach. And they all lived in there for free. And I said, I'm not moving in there. They got cockroaches the size of alley cats in there, and which ought to tell you how big the alley cats were. And I said, I'm not living in there. I want to get paid. And I said, I want $100 a show. I mean, we're talking 83 here.
Yeah.
And he said, okay. And I want it every show, bar none. I don't care what the circumstances are, because I'm not going to get a job. You like to rehearse during the week. Well, so he agreed to everything that I wanted. And I joined the band. I had a great time again. So my first show in Steeler was at the Country Club, which was a real legendary place in LA.
Oh yeah.
And we're headlining. So I'm thinking to myself, bowling alley or the Country Club? I think I'll play at the Country Club. So I went and played, so I'm playing at the Country Club. I have to go. Now I'm still in Legs Diamond at this point.
Oh,
so
okay.
I have to go to Legs Diamond's storage facility and get my gear out. And the guitarist, Jim May, who's passed away since, says, are you joining Steeler? Oh, no, I'm not joining Steeler. Because I actually hadn't told them yet. I wanted to do the show. I wanted to see how it actually was. But I was leaning that way. And I said, no, I'm just checking it out and they're paying me. So I went and did the show. Well, the response to the show was like amazing. And I'm playing in LA, which is why I moved to LA. Steeler, unbeknownst to me, was like one of the biggest draws, if not the biggest on-sign draw at the time in LA. And Ron had this whole kind of diagram, mission statement, whatever plan that he was going to follow to make Steeler this huge, as big as Motley Crue and Ratt and all that stuff. Now, that didn't exactly happen, but I mean, they had a record deal. They made records when they turned into Keel and all that. So I did the show. The Legs Diamond guys came and they realized that I probably wasn't going to stay. And the guitar player was really pissed off at me. And I said, look, I get it, but I moved here specifically for this. I wanted to play in a band in LA. You guys can relate to this.
Of course.
Very few times in your life do you live where whatever it is you do, that's the happening place. That's the place. And in the 80s in LA, that was the place. Everyone was getting signed. Everyone's brother was getting signed. I don't know. I had two brothers that got signed. And it was the place to be. Tuesday night at the Troubadour is sold out, and you're playing at Perkins Palace, and you're over here at the blah, blah. And I was thinking, I want to be part of that. It'd be like being in England during the swinging 60s or the blues boom or the new wave of British heavy metal, which, if I could have moved anywhere, if I could have afforded to move to England during the new wave of British heavy metal, I probably would have, because my musical taste probably leaned more that way. But I'm in Steeler. We're playing these great shows. We're headlining everywhere. And if we're not, we're opening for someone that has a record deal.
Yeah.
And all the shows are sold out. The band is shit hot. And I figured I made a good decision. My girlfriend moved out shortly after I did. Now my wife, you met my wife there.
Yeah.
And she got to experience the whole mania, of that whole LA in the 80s, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. It'd be like being in Seattle during the Nirvana days. I'm sure if you had a some shorts and some army boots and a flannel shirt, you fit right in over there. Well, in LA, it was the other way around. You had your leather jacket and your, whatever. So it was great.
So you've mentioned your brothers.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So Steeler sort of morphed into Keel, and your brother was the bass player in Keel. So how did you not become the bass player in Keel, and it went to your brother?
Well, here's the deal. Ron, we couldn't get a deal at Steeler. It wasn't going to happen for some reason. Ron felt, and the manager, Tim Heine, also felt that maybe the name was a little tainted because of the whole Yngwie thing and whatever. So they decided that they were going to redo it, and Ron was going to call the band Keel. And so he asked me if I wanted to do it. Well, Ron at the time somehow got his name on the Black Sabbath radar. Mm-hmm. And so Ron was thinking he was possibly going to be in Black Sabbath, but he would also do Keel as his own side project if Tony would allow, or Iommi would allow him to do it. Well, at the time also, somebody from Lieber and Krebs had seen me playing in Steeler and decided that I would be a good fit for Michael Schenker, who was one of my heroes. And I thought, yeah, I'll play with Michael Schenker. Shit, and I'd been in Steeler for over a year. We weren't going to get a deal. Since Ron was thinking of going to do Sabbath, that was going to happen, obviously he would take the gig. Now, it didn't happen, but that was at the time it was on the board. I thought, well, I'll do Schenker. And so Ron said, well, who can I get to play bass? I didn't want to do Keel because I thought if he got Sabbath, that he would be with Sabbath and I would blow the Michael Schenker thing. Right. I wanted to play with Schenker. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then he goes, well, who can I get for Keel? I said, my brother Kenny. He's an excellent bass player. At the time, Kenny had been playing about a year and a half. And
wow.
And so Kenny got in Keel and had a record deal, and he'd been playing less than 2 years. Wow. So
all right, Kenny.
Yeah, and Kenny was a hard worker, and him and I would sit around a lot, and I would show him how I would approach things. And so in the early years, it was very much a learning experience for him, but he ended up becoming an excellent bass player. He still is. We're still real close. And he lives here in Phoenix as well. And I was so happy for him that he's in a band, they're on tour, they're on MTV, they're opening for Bon Jovi, they're opening in Europe for Dio. But I'm sitting there going, well, Ron didn't get Sabbath, so now Keel is his main priority. Well, Schenker kind of went off the deep end at the time, right after the Built for Destroy album. They showed that picture of him smashing his Mercedes with a V. Yeah. He actually did that. So, and I think he had his substance problems were probably getting the best of him. So he got off the grid for a bit. And now this gig I was hoping I was going to go get, all I had to do was go play with Schenker, which I never got to do, and the gig was mine. I'd have been able to, my style of bass playing would have fit in with that, I thought. And I was thinking that was going to be my shot. Well, now my brother's in Keel. I'm sitting around in LA twiddling my thumbs. I'm in other bands, but I kind of felt like my window of opportunity had missed, that I'd missed it. So I was happy for Kenny, and still am, but I was really hustling for something else at that point. And, I eventually auditioned for Ozzy, and that's how I met Jake. Yeah. And it took a few years before that finally came to be a deal, but that's how that happened.
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, how do you, other than what was this is kind of an odd question, but this is just fanboy nerd shit right here. Was Jake playing with the Ratt guys back way back when you fell in with it? Okay. It was.
No, Jake was at the time, I think might have been in Dio. I know he was in Dio for a while. Okay. So the guitarist when I went and auditioned was Warren, but Warren was like maybe 19 years old. so he was kind of just stuck to himself and would just play his guitar. He was just an amazing player. They called him Torch, and because he could just light the guitar on fire.
Yeah.
And I mean, he didn't really say much. We didn't get to know each other very well in the short time. I only rehearsed with him like 3 times. And but over the course of time, we were good friends over the course of the 30 or 40 years it's been.
Well, you made an impact with that Badlands, the first Badlands record. I have friends that spin that still to this day. And, me and my Toys guys were fortunate to play with you guys a couple times, and you guys were on fire. Musicianship, incredible. You guys went on to do really viable things, obviously. I mean, Eric's in Kiss. What the fuck?
Yeah. Eric plays drums in Kiss, and Eric was always kind of destined for something like that. I mean, even before we recorded the first Badlands album, Eric had to take a vacation or a leave of absence so he could go do 2 months playing drums for Paul Stanley. So that connection was always there. And we actually went and seen Eric play with Paul Stanley.
Wow.
Eric's a lot better drummer than he gets credit for.
Yes.
And I mean, he plays great on the Badlands record, but Eric's real, in my opinion, his real strong point, his selling point is he can play in any style.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it, what kind of great chops he has, because he does have amazing chops, but his feel is what really kind of makes him so important. I remember asking Jake one time when he was in Aussie, when I went to audition for Aussie, and I went to Scotland for 3 weeks and auditioned, and Randy Castillo was a drummer. And I asked Jake, I said, so what's the deal with Castillo? Why? Because they had Jimmy DeGrasso before Castillo. And I thought Jimmy's a great drummer, as did I think Randy was, but I wanted to know what was the difference. And Jake said, Randy has amazing feel. You don't ever have to look at him. You don't have to wonder where he's at. He's always going to be there. He doesn't speed up. He doesn't slow down. You never have to worry. He's driving the car, and you don't have to turn around and see what's going on. Like when you're a little kid and you're falling asleep and your dad's driving, you go, oh, okay, good. That's when you're playing with a drummer that just is on cruise control. Jimmy's in Atomic Kings. He's that way. So you don't ever have to go, what the hell was that? Where'd that come? What, can we speed up, slow down, something? It's never that problem. It's always just right where it's supposed to be, which allows you to do what you want to do without having to wonder what the hell's going on behind you.
Yeah, so, that stink eye. Whenever it's a good gig and a good session, when you never have to turn around and stink eye the shit out of your bro.
Well, it's always one of those things like, who farted back there?
Yeah.
You end up giving them that look like, the hell was that? So, I mean, I've been fortunate that I played with a lot of really great drummers over the course of my career of doing sessions and all that sort of stuff. And I've got to play with a lot of really name guys, including, I did a record one time for a Japanese guy. I played 3 tracks, and on one track was Steve Gadd.
Wow.
Another track was Weckl. And the other track was Vinnie Colaiuta.
Wow.
And the funny part is,
those are drum gods.
I know, and I knew who Gadd was, and I knew who Weckl was.
Yeah.
And so the third guy they brought in was Vinnie Colaiuta, and I didn't know who he was. And so we're listening back to the track, and I'm going, "Yeah, man, good track." This drummer's insane. And he's Vinnie Colaiuta, and I just recorded with him, but I didn't meet him. And I said, "Yeah, who's that?" And the guy looks at me and goes, "What are you, insane? It's Vinnie Colaiuta. He's played on yada, 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 yada." And I went, "Oh." And so I went back and told him, "Hey, Vinnie, I'm an idiot. You're a really great drummer. Thank you." And so it ended up being like a big laugh. But I've got to do records with Ainsley Dunbar and Prairie Prince and Blotzer and on and on. And those guys, that's what you get with those kind of guys, is you don't ever have to wonder what smells bad back there.
Right.
And so I don't care how great your chops are. I mean, it's nice if you have them, But what I really care about is what's it feel like? You know, what's the swing like? Does everything fit in there right? There's nothing worse than trying to play with a guy who's trying to fit 9 pounds of bologna in a 1 pound bag because he's going to do that one drum fill because I just got to do it because it's so cool. Yeah, it doesn't fit. Yeah, but I mean, if it did fit, it would be great. I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
so,
play the song, not the drums.
Yeah. So, I mean, both Badlands drummers, Jeff Martin is a great drummer as well. I've done a million records, which, well, not a million.
Well, and he's your Surgical Steel bro.
Singer. Yeah.
But he was not the drummer in Surgical Steel.
No, I know that. He was the singer. And my mind is blown in that connection. When he joined Badlands as drummer, that name, I was like, hold on a second. And I never knew that you had, that was your band, that was your thing until right now. So back then when I see Jeff Martin, new drummer for Badlands, I'm like, what the hell? He plays drums too? It's like Todd LaTorre from Queensryche. He's this bad motherfucker singer, but oh my God, he plays drums just as good as he sings. It's pretty impressive.
Well, Jeff, I'd known Jeff since like maybe 73, 74, 73. Yeah. And the funny story is Jeff had just moved to Arizona, to Phoenix from Wisconsin. And I had a band at the time called Ghost Rose, and wasn't very good. I'd only been playing a couple of years, and it was just kind of the band you grew up with. And but I was like the neighborhood hard ass where I live. So, you know, my band was like my gang, my family, whatever. And I didn't like anyone talking crap about my band. Well, Jeff Martin had come and seen us play somewhere, and he said, yeah, bass player and drummer are good. Our bass player and guitar player are good, but the drummer sucks. So someone told me that. So I'm kind of like I'm on the hunt for Jeff Martin a little bit so I can get in his face. I get a phone call from this guy named Randy Patterson. Randy Patterson. And he lives right behind the high school. So at lunchtime, he brings his stuff outside and he plays, and all the girls from the high school come over at lunch and watch him play on his patio. And he has a regular bass player and drummer that he does this with a couple times a week. We couldn't get his regular bass player and drummer, so he calls me up and he says, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Do you want to do it? It's going to be chicks. I'm like, yeah, I like chicks. So I said, is what's his name, the drummer, going to be there? And he said, no, I got this other guy that just moved here, Jeff Martin. Oh, Jeff Martin's going to be there. Yeah, I'll be there. So I figure I'm going to go to the thing, go to the gig, play some songs, meet some chicks, kick his ass. It's like, it's the whole thing wrapped into one neat package. I'm thinking, all right, gig, chicks, pounding. Yes, I'm into it. So, we get there to play, and I got a chip on my shoulder, which at that time of my life, I always had one anyway. And Jeff shows up and he starts playing, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's actually, I'd never seen him play. This guy's really good. He plays kind of like Mitch Mitchell and kind of plays like Ian Pace, plays like Don Brewer, plays like all the guys I like. And so we're like playing, and Jeff and I are like kind of getting into playing. We leave the guitar player in the dust. He could have left. It wouldn't have mattered. We're just doing all this stuff. So afterwards, instead of beating the hell out of him, I said, hey, my band, my drummer had just quit. The one that he made fun of had just quit to go he was going to college to learn how to play marimba and vibe, which he got a degree in that. Right. And so at ASU. And I said, so we're looking for a drummer. You want to do it? And he goes, yeah, I'd be interested. So we get together and rehearse, and I tell the guitarist, I said, Jeff Martin's going to come over. And he goes, screw that guy. I said, no. You got to see him play. I said, he's like the best local drummer I've ever seen. He's like going and watching a Deep Purple concert. It's like Ian Pace is there. And he's like, no. So we get together and we have a jam. And sure enough, Jeff is just on the money, plays kind of the way he plays now. Everything's, it's like, I'd never seen a local guy do that. And so after the rehearsal, I say to the guitarist, Jim, I said, so yeah, me and you and Jeff. He goes, I don't want to play with him. He's too good. And I said, well, good. Let me know how that works out for you, because I'm going to start a band with him. Because if you can keep up with this guy, you can go to the next level.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story, Jeff was always a monster drummer. I mean, he was so much better of a drummer than I was a bass player that I had to step my game up like 10 steps just so I could keep up with him. And
so a guy that you wanted to kill,
yeah,
you know what I mean? The guy that you wanted to crush.
You were probably right.
Because because he was a shit talking son of a, it ended up being a huge influence upon your playing and pushed you to a whole new thing.
I probably never said this to Jeff because I don't think his ego could handle it. But probably Jeff Martin made me a better bass player. And don't get me wrong, we're still good friends to this day. But also he made me a worse bass player because I started really going over the top with it and really playing a zillion notes above the 12th fret and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And since we're on the story hour here, I was doing a recording the first time I was ever in a real studio for this band called Sluggo. And Rick Nielsen was, in theory, going to record our album. He was going to produce it. So we were doing demos in the studio to send to Rick Nielsen. And we recorded the whole record. And the guy that owned the studio, a guy named Dennis Alexander, came to me. We were listening to the playbacks of the songs. And he looks at me and goes, "Do you even play the bass? Do you even know what it's for?" He goes, "Because what you're doing on this isn't bass." He goes, "I don't know what the hell it is, but it's not bass. And before you can call yourself a bass player, you better actually figure out what it is a bass player does." So my response was something akin to, "Death wish? Do you have one? How's your dental insurance? Better get some." I was pissed. And I thought, dude, I'll mess you up. So I went home and I was pissed off. And I was like, screw this guy. I listened to the tape, though, and I went, damn it if he's not right.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back and I had to kind of take part of what I was doing already and reconfigure it into actually playing the bass, where I wasn't so worried about being above the 12th fret, playing Ulrich Ross solos during the rest of the song, and realize what the bass was for. Because people would always say, hey, the guitarist, and when I played with Jeff, would say, "Hey, do you think when I do a solo, do you think you and Jeff could not do one at the same time?" And we'd be like, "Screw you. Of course we're doing a solo. You're doing one." So it was like very impressive to watch. And it was probably pretty musical. But from a song structure or anything that anyone wanted to hear for real, other than maybe musicians, it was kind of a mess. It was like a cacophony of soloing going on. Jeff drum soloing, me bass soloing, and whichever poor guitar player got stuck behind us while we were doing it. So Jeff made me a better bass player, a worse bass player, and then Dennis Alexander, the guy from the studio, actually kind of turned me around, because I probably wasn't going to be able to go much further in this kind of crazy off-the-wall style that I was playing. When Eddie Van Halen first came out and everyone started figuring out what that was, what that tapping thing was, I figured it out. And I could do it better than any guitar player here in Phoenix could do it. And I spent all my time doing it. And I would do it in every song. And I would, again, just part of my really over the top, taking that. And a guy came to me one time and he said, "Oh, you play just like my friend in Buffalo, Billy Sheehan." Well, no one had ever heard of Billy at that point. And I said, "Yeah, whatever." And so all of a sudden he brings me a Talus record like a year later. And I listened to it and I'm like, damn it, he does it too. Mm-hmm. Not knowing he did it and him not having the first clue who I was. So I immediately stopped doing it, because he got a record out before I did. And I didn't want to be known as the guy who did the Billy Sheehan thing, which is, you do that Sheehan thing. And I never did it again. And the other day at rehearsal, I did some and they were like, "Oh, you actually can do that." And I said, "Never again." And so it was just part of the learning process of how to become a bass player. Because my style is fairly melodic, fairly musical. I'm a busy player, and there's a lot of stuff between, like, me and the guitarist kind of weaving in and out of each other's way. I'm playing with him a little bit. He's playing with me a little bit. Same with the drums. Atomic Kings has a lot of that in there. Badlands had a lot of that in there.
Yeah.
And just about everything I do, I can't really at this point really play any other way. I mean, I would do these records after Badlands was over. I did a dozen or so records for Japanese singers or guitarists, and they'd say, can you do Rudy Sarzo? No. I said, well, we want you. I said, then call him. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to do it. I only do this. This is what I do. I'm the best version of Greg Chaisson that's sitting on this chair right now. And that's all I can hope to be. That's all I ever wanted to be. I don't want to be the best bass player in the world because it's an idiotic, thing to try to do. You're competing, everyone that does everything. And there's probably some dude in his bedroom that can do stuff that no one's ever seen before on the bass. And so all I care about, and it took me a long time to figure that out, rather than try to be the best bass player in the world, why don't you just be the best bass player you can be and say what you want to say and stand, tall with what it is you want to do and don't deviate from it. And I'm sure there's millions of guys that will tell you the same thing. When someone says, do you think you're better? I don't know. Of course I'm not better. Think you're better than Billy Sheehan? Of course not. He's Billy Sheehan. No one can be better than Billy Sheehan at being Billy Sheehan. Am I better at being Greg Chaisson than Billy Sheehan? I'd kick Billy Sheehan's ass being Greg Chaisson, and he'd kick my ass being Billy Sheehan. It's an idiotic thing. I mean, Nikki Sixx is better at being Nikki Sixx than I am.
Yeah.
And that's the whole concept to me. I don't care what someone else does. I can appreciate it. Yeah. And what do you think of Steve Harris? Steve Harris is great. Are you better than Steve Harris? Not at being Steve Harris. No.
Amen.
Yeah.
So that's where my whole thing falls.
I feel like I was very young, realizing that even people I was in bands with would even say, yeah, Jason, but you're a better singer than so-and-so. And I was like, I thought about that as a compliment. And then I tore down the compliment. And I said, well, listen, I am not a better than anything when I'm still struggling, trying to figure out what the hell this is that I'm trying to do.
Right.
So learning how to, back to bass, play the bass instead of, play the song instead of the bass. Sing the song instead of show off your vocal abilities and how high or how low or how whatever it is you do. Play the song, write the song, play the song. If the song is 1,000,000 notes at 1,000,000 miles an hour, is that a song? Well, sure. And on some planets, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
The art of writing a song, the art of writing a good song or writing a hook is not as easy as everyone thinks it is. And if you think it when you listen to what other people write and you go, okay, yeah, I got a friend of mine that's recording right now and he played me some of the stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you've got some ideas there, but there's no song in there. There's no hook. Well, what do you mean? Well, there's nothing memorable. Well, it's memorable to me. Well, then make a record for yourself, in which case most people do, even with Atomic Kings, when we're making a record, it's for ourselves. But we're also conscious of what we're doing while we're doing it. So if someone leaves the table, takes the headphones off, whatever, and they go away and they immediately forgot everything you had on there, there's nothing to remember, then you probably didn't do whatever your job,
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, if you're going to put out records, you want people to hopefully buy into it. Now, I'm not saying that any music has to be any one thing. There might be people that walk away from a Mastodon record humming those riffs.
Sure.
And that's cool to me because I enjoy some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if you can get a hook and a memorable thing in whatever style it is you're doing, it doesn't have to be a 2.5-minute Beatles song or any other song. It just has to be something that works for you, that hopefully people can bop their head to a little bit, and that they can go away singing, what is that? Oh yeah, that's the whatever I just listened to. God, I got that stuck in my head. Mm-hmm. Ryan will always come to me and he'll start singing some really stupid song, and he'll go, I'm going to get this really lame song stuck in your head. And I said, nah, you can't do it. And he goes, why not? Because then I start singing, que sera, sera, whatever. Well, now I just got that stuck in my head. That's better than the thing you just got stuck. So I'm going to sing that for a few minutes, and then I'll go off to something else, and then I'll forget whatever it is you had.
Yeah. So I've had friends, acquaintances, say, man, I wrote 200 songs in a month, or whatever. And I say, oh, really? How many of them are good?
Yeah. Well,
and they're just like, what? What do you mean? I said, well, how many of them are good? Tell me honestly, how many of them are good?
And how many can you actually remember of the 200 you just wrote?
Yeah, it's just to prove a point to exactly what we're all in agreement of here is like, overplaying has its place, but if the drummer is not creating pocket and palette for you guys up front to play over and to not overplay over, I mean, there's a place for everything. The importance of music is to create sound that has emotional value. If it doesn't have any emotional value, if the audience is not paying attention to you, you're just a jukebox. They don't give a shit about you. You're just noise.
It's a cover band at a bar.
Right.
Yeah. Guys, bands get all bent out of shape because people don't, pay attention to them while they're playing.
Just tell us what it is.
It's a Badlands ticket stub from 1992.
Far out.
Is that not coming into focus? San Antonio, Texas. You guys were on tour with Bang Tango.
Oh, yeah.
That?
They did about 6 weeks with us.
Yeah. That was my background. You played at Sneakers in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Diamond too.
My background is music journalism. I've been doing this for about 35 years. And the first major rock star that I ever interviewed was Jake on this night right here.
Cool.
And this is before I knew anything about going through a publicist. So I was just kind of stalker guy out by the back door of the venue.
Nice.
And Jake graciously did the interview in my car, and I recorded it on a boombox because that's how professional I was.
I think that's fucking awesome.
You're going to have to ask him about that.
Yeah, I've got awesome pictures. I mean, I remember he got out of my car and there was a bunch of dirt all over the floorboard from his boots, and I left it in there for a month. I was like, "That's Jake's dirt, man."
Jake Lee's dirt. How much? I'm selling Jake Lee's dirt right now.
So your story is amazing. I'm just sitting here listening to you, and I've got there's so many things I want to ask you. But let me start with Legs Diamond, because I'm from San Antonio, and I understand I was one of those guys that was at every Legs Diamond show that was sold out at Sunken Garden Theater. And so what time frame were you in Legs Diamond?
I moved to LA in 82, the end of 82. So it had been summer of 83 was when we did that tour. It was about a month long. And Legs Diamond was very, very well connected with Joe Anthony.
Right.
And so he's one of the reasons we came out there. And actually, I was, and Joe Anthony knew I'd been in Surgical Steel.
Of course he did. He's Joe Anthony.
He's Joe Anthony. Yeah. And so he invited me to the radio station to do an interview about Surgical Steel. Wow. So, and I'm like, they're all listening to this interview, the guys are. And so our first show was in San Antonio. And then we went off and did some other shows. And then our last show was in San Antonio. Well, at none of these shows had we played this song called Woman, which was a huge hit in San Antonio. And again, I'm still, Quiet Riot came. They had just played the US Festival, and they came to San Antonio 2 days later after the US Festival to start their tour, and they opened for Legs Diamond. Oh. So can you imagine that situation where all these guys, they're there, they've got the #1 record or whatever it is, and they're opening for Legs Diamond at a club. And I think it was Sneakers. And so that didn't go over very well. But anyway, so I do this interview, and Joe Anthony's asked me about Surgical Steel and this and that. And he says, so Legs Diamond, you guys didn't play Woman. And I said, we're not playing. But we had actually been talking about, because every show we had done in Texas, we were getting these requests for Woman. And so we were talking about doing it, and the guitarist was saying there's too many parts. I don't know what to play, you know, which exact parts. It's too hard to work it out right now. So I said, well, we've been working on it in sound check, but I don't think we're going to play it. So I get back to this party that they're all at, and I get tuned up by the guitarist. Oh, you said we're going to play Woman. And I said, I didn't say we're going to play Woman. I said that we're talking about playing. Oh, now we have to play it. He was really pissed off at me. And so I'm like thinking, screw you. So we play, and we work out Woman in sound check, and it's our last show of this tour, and we decide to play it. And so it starts with the keyboards, you know, where the crowd goes crazy.
Yeah.
And we play this song, right? And it gets to the first chorus, and the crowd is singing it. Rick Stanford, who lives in San Antonio now, he doesn't even sing. He just stops. He's like completely gobsmacked that they're singing it, the whole audience.
Yeah.
And the guitar player's kind of stunned too. So I kind of left my side of the stage, and I went over and stood right next to the guitarist, and I made this face at him. And he's like, shrugs me off like, screw you.
Shut up, man.
It's like the high point of the whole tour that we played this song. The crowd went absolutely crazy. I mean, even to this day, when I think about it, I still get goosebumps about it, because it was such a surreal moment to have that happen. I mean, I'm still good friends with Mike Prince and with Rick, and also Jeff Poole is a really good friend of mine. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time with them, and they obviously went on to make records and did a tour of Europe. So things turned out the way for them that they wanted, and I'm happy about that. But things also turned out for me the way I wanted it, because like I said, the playing in LA thing, if I had never got to do that, I would feel like, even after, you know, whatever career I've had, I would feel like I missed something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you went out there and got plugged in, man. It was
pretty quick. And I like I said, it wasn't lost on me when I'd go back to Phoenix and my friends were playing at a desert party, a 5K'er out in the middle of nowhere for no money. And it's hot as hell, and you have to build a stage and all that crap. And don't get me wrong, I've done that as well. And I enjoyed that when I was in my overplaying years, before I understood what the bass was.
Right.
Not a guitar with 2 less strings. I did a lot of that, and I enjoyed that, and I have fond memories of it. But if that was going to be the end of it, I would again feel like I missed something. The fact that I got to go, even if everything else hadn't happened, the fact that I got to be in LA when that was happening and headline the Whiskey and the Troubadour and the Palace and Perkins Palace and yada, yada, yada. I mean, we opened for Ratt on New Year's Eve at the Santa Monica Civic. And, hey, you know, Deep Purple played at the Santa Monica Civic.
Yeah.
You know, it's Sweet played at the Santa Monica Civic.
Yeah.
I had no problem playing the Santa Monica Civic. And Riot was on the bill. And they actually... They opened the show. I knew who they were.
What year was that? What year?
That would have probably been New Year's of 83.
Oh, wow.
83, 84, turning into 84. So Steeler was so big that they actually asked us to be on the bill. It had nothing to do with the fact that I knew those guys. That Steeler was such a draw, but Ratt had a record out. They didn't really need any help. But the fact that we got to be on that, 5,000 seaters, sold out, probably one of the bigger gigs I had ever played at that time. And to be on that bill with my friends and stuff was pretty cool. And just to be part of that. And I always look at venues like, you know, oh, somebody played. Oh, Zeppelin played here. The Syrian Mosque in Pittsburgh. Humble Pie played here. Okay.
Yeah, I played there.
Yeah. So it's not there anymore, but you're playing there and you're realizing who all played there.
Yeah,
it's like the first Badlands album. It's recorded in half of it's recorded in LA at 1-on-1, and the other half's recorded in the record plant in New York. So we get in there, and the guy Jake tells me, he goes, "Hey, Mountain recorded Climbing and Nantucket Sleigh Ride on this board."
Holy moly.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good with that. And so I don't know why that kind of geeks me out.
Because you're a nerd like us.
Yeah, that's why you're on this show, Greg.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're a nerd.
Another nerdy thing. I met a guy. I was looking for someone to master my solo album that I did back in the 90s. And someone turned me on to this guy named Wally Troggett, who mastered Dark Side of the Moon and some Michael Jackson. And his office, his mastering lab, was in the bottom of the Capitol building. The round Capitol building in Hollywood was down there. So he was an older guy, and I went down there and met him, and he had a small Neve mastering board, and I mastered a record there. Well, him and I hit it off. So every time I would do a record for Mike Barney, or I would do some other records that I did, I'd say, hey, let me call my friend Wally, and he'll master it cheap, just because I go there and hang around with him. So when you're walking through the Capitol building, there's all the Grand Funk stuff and the Beach Boys and Dark Side of the Moon, and all this stuff is on the wall, the gold records, and you're actually on the same mastering board with the same guy that mastered. Now he's passed away, but he was a great guy, and I learned so much about how mastering works versus how recording works, and what mastering is actually for and why you do it, from this guy who was probably, other than maybe George Marino at Sterling Sound, probably Wally is one of the two guys. So it'd be like you're, learning hitting from Pete Rose. Pete Rose wants to teach me how to hit. I'll listen to Pete. Yeah. So I got to, that was a real geek out part for me, to be able to do. Sure. I probably had Wally master maybe 10 different things I was on. That was always really cool.
Well, Greg, you've toured and recorded and played with and written music with about half of my fucking record collection, and I didn't realize it until today, which is July 2nd, 2023, and I feel late to the party. Is this your first vinyl appearance?
Yes, it is.
It is, yeah. Metal Massacre 2, I'm holding up for people listening and not watching. Jim Keeler, tell us about Jim Keeler, lead guitar on Rivet Head, Surgical Steel on Metal Massacre 2. Tell us about Jim Keeler.
Jim was like my best friend at the time. He was actually in my wedding. So we're still friends to this day. He still plays guitar.
Is he there in Phoenix?
He is in Phoenix.
Okay.
And he's going to do some kind of, like I said, there's a Surgical Steel release with all those guys.
Really?
That are on there. So Paul Kasanovich, the other guitarist who's passed away, a great guy. And then Jeff Martin still singing. And then Bob Mylan, the drummer, who's one of my favorite drummers I've ever played with. Great drummer. And so that was recorded before I was out of the band, and that came out, and that I think is their really only thing they've ever really actually had released on a large scale.
What, this Metal Massacre 2? Surgical Steel never really had a record out, like a full length?
They never got a record deal. They put out something on their own a few years ago, but it was just kind of on their own. And this thing that they're doing now is actually off this other label. I think it's the first thing. I don't know when it comes out. I think it's sometime before Christmas.
Well, in that area, Scottsdale, Phoenix area, Surgical Steel is still kind of legend.
Yeah, it's funny because for about 2 years they were the biggest band in Arizona,
right?
And I got to be kind of on the front end of that. Like I said, Keeler and I had started another band and wanted to call it Surgical Steel, and we did. And then that band kind of went south. Bob Mylan was the drummer in it, but it ended up the guitarist was John Aquilino, who ended up playing an Icon.
Oh, okay.
And so with a different singer, and so it went south. Then Jim joined another band with Paul Kasanovich in it, and he said, "Can I use the name Surgical Steel?" Because I thought the name up, and I said, "Yeah, sure, I don't care." And so they were doing shows, but they didn't have any originals. And so they opened for, I want to say it was Uriah Heep at a big club here called Graham Central Station, and they actually got booed off the stage. Oh. And because they were playing covers.
Right.
And so I was at the show. And it was kind of an unfortunate gig, you know, because they were my friends. So they came to me right after the show, and I mean right after, and okay, we want you to be in the band. And because I wrote. And I said, okay. I said, but here's the deal. If I'm in the band, and we're talking like still the new wave of British heavy metal time, you know, this is like 1981. I said, and I had kind of a vision of what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a vehicle. And I said, if I do this, what I say is what we do. And they all agreed to it. So I got in the band. We wrote Rivet Head like a couple days later. And we started writing other stuff. At the time, it was just me and Jim doing the writing, with Jeff throwing the vocals on later. Paul eventually became a writer as well. So at the time, you know, I just started contacting people in LA that had these little fanzines that you would put out, like John Stradansky, who I'm sure you know, John.
Yeah.
He had one. And so I sent him a tape. And so he did an article on us. And I wrote an article about the Phoenix metal scene. And blah, blah, blah. And then we started getting other little interviews. It wasn't even like interviews. It'd be just like fanzine stuff. There was no internet, none of this kind of thing, obviously, back then. So the band was actually gaining some traction. And we were playing here, and we were getting really popular. But my friend Steve Brownlee worked at Green World Records, and he got a copy of the cassette. And he came out to Phoenix to see us play, and Rob Halford came on stage and sang with us. And Rob was a friend of ours, and he would show up every time that he was in town, and he would come out and sing. So part of what made Surgical Steel big was the Rob connection, because you got to see Rob at the time, you know, it was Screaming for Vengeance time.
Yeah.
And, you got to see Rob singing, you know, Heading Out to the Highway, or whatever it was we were doing. And we did a lot of Priest at the time, because Jeff was a big devotee of Rob's.
Oh yeah.
So we
just like myself.
Yeah. So I mean, and Rob was a cool dude. Of all the rock stars I've met, Rob is like, you know, like your next door neighbor. You know, he doesn't have any attitude about it. And I haven't talked to him in years, but he was always super nice guy.
Some of this was happening at the Mason Jar.
We played at the Jar quite a bit, and but the Jar holds
30 people.
I could tell you another story about
Shoebox.
the Jar, but I played there a million times. So Surgical Steel, we were getting all kinds of interest, and so Alan Niven, who managed Great White and eventually Guns N' Roses, was interested in managing us, and he wanted us to come to LA and record with Don Dokken doing our demos and producing them. And he offered us a show at the country club opening for Hughes and Thrall. And so I went back to the band and said, hey, we got this. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. No, we couldn't possibly compete with those kind of bands. I said, we could if we went out there. I mean, let's go see, you know, we don't have to move there. Let's just go do some shows. And oh no. And so I pushed really hard I said, we got to go. I mean, this is a shot. What do you guys want to just be a big fish in a little pond, or you want to compete? It's LA. Everyone's getting a record deal, yada, yada, yada. No, so they kicked me out. That's why I got kicked out, because I was really adamant that we go do these. I mean, what the hell? You got Alan Niven, who's interested in managing you. Hello. You know, and Don Dokken's going to produce your demo, and you get to open for Hughes and Thrall at the what's the one when whatever that movie is where they tap on the guy's head. It's not Mueller, but
McFly.
Yeah, McFly. That's exactly it. I'm thinking, what's wrong with you guys? Oh, I don't know. So they said, you know what? If you want to do that, let me just tell you, I didn't take it well.
Okay.
So they kicked me out. So I'm in the best band in Phoenix, and we have possible interests. And the guy that made all this crap happen, the guy that made the connections, that writes the songs. I mean, you're going to kick out the guy that writes the songs, really? Okay. So they did. They kicked me out, and I took my little red wagon and moved to LA with it like 2 or 3 months later. and they wrote more songs, but the direction of the band changed from like a cross between Vintage Priest and Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
To kind of more modern Priest meets Poison, which wouldn't have worked for me anyway, because that's just not where my interest lies. And
That's
so
fair.
it became a much simpler form of music, and they started writing love songs and all that kind of crap. And I was like, nah, I probably made the right decision.
Because you're a rocker, Greg.
I got my leather jacket right in that closet right there.
You're a fucking rocker.
I was going to ask you about Rob Halford, because I think your brother, your other brother, Todd, plays bass in Tough.
Still to this day. I'm glad you brought him up.
So you've got two brothers. All three of you have done things that we're familiar with: Tough, Keel, Badlands, of course.
They've all made their mark too. I've actually rubbed elbows with all three Chaisson brothers, and I'm proud of it.
You normally get to be the best bass player in your own family. At my house, you get to slug it out. Because Kenny and Todd are both excellent players.
Well, your brother Todd, I think at one point I interviewed him, and he shared a photo of Rob Halford at your house at some backyard barbecue or something.
Yeah, it was another person's house, but whenever Rob would come in town, he'd say, let's set up something. So we'd get a barbecue, and everyone would show up and hang out with them. And then he'd want to go tubing down the Salt River. It's, so you go out there in the summer and you get your giant inner tubes and you tie them all together with a cooler of beer or whatever, and you tube down the river when the temperature's like 145 degrees out, and everyone ends up looking like a potato chip by the time they're done. Rob liked doing that kind of crap, so we would accommodate him because he's Rob.
Right. I was going to ask you about Badlands. On paper, I mean, the talent in that band is off the hook. I mean, great players, great singer. People still regard those records as being, all killer, no filler. At the time, do you think there was any, because of the break with Jake and Ozzy being so nasty, do you think there was any record business politics that sort of prevented Badlands from becoming bigger?
The record company politics that happened were more not because of what happened with Ozzy. It's just because we signed with the wrong label. We screwed up by being involved with Paul O'Neill and signing with Atlantic, who Jason Flom didn't like the band, didn't believe in the band. He was more in line with, say, what Skid Row did, which I like Skid Row, so don't get me wrong. But he was looking for something more along that lines. I mean, at the time, you got to remember, a lot of bands were saying, yeah, we're doing this 70s thing. And we're going to go back to 70s. And Lynch Mob, we're doing 70s. And Blue Murder, we're going to do the 70s. And what's the other one I'm thinking of here? There's somebody else in there that was doing 70s as well.
Kingdom Come was
Mr. Big, we're doing the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we did the 70s. I don't know what those other guys did, and I like their records, but we stayed true to what Jake's vision of the band was. I mean, when Jake and I auditioned for Ozzy, we became friends. We stayed in contact under the guise that eventually he would leave Ozzy and he would start his own band. And it was going to be this very 70s sort of thing that he'd been kind of stockpiling this catalog of songs. People always say, how come he didn't write on the first record? Well, Jake had been saving up all this stuff that he'd been writing that didn't necessarily fit Ozzy, that would fit this 70s sort of thing that he had in mind. And he wanted a 70s style singer and a 70s style drummer with 70s style, the way the songs were arranged and production and all that. So he was very adamant about what he wanted. I liked the way Jake wrote, so I didn't feel like, oh man, isn't anyone going to listen to my songs? I like Jake's songs, and I got to write my own bass parts. And Jake really kind of liked what it was I did, and very seldom did he get involved. I'll give you an example of when he did is on Dreams in the Dark, that opening bass line. I actually wrote that, but I played it an octave lower. And he said, I really dig that part. Can you play it an octave higher? Why, yes, I can. And so that's how he would get involved in basically what it is I did, but he trusted what I did. He trusted what Eric did, because Eric wrote just killer drum parts, and he trusted what Ray did. And so it was like really kind of Atomic Kings-ish. Everyone would throw in their part, and it would turn into a Badlands song. And we knew that going 70s that hard might be a hard sell. And because Jason Flom didn't like us and still doesn't, which is why you can't get the Badlands CDs, has nothing to do with all this other crap. It has to do with Jason Flom basically doesn't want that stuff out there, because if he put it out, Badlands would get a gold record in an hour. We're sitting at about 485,000 copies. When he basically, what happened is Ray did an interview when the second record was going to come out. Ray had a serious dispute going on with Atlantic. And so Ray did an interview about Atlantic sucks and Jason Flom sucks, and they wouldn't know what to do with a good record if it hit him in the head, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the meantime, the promo for the record's coming out for Voodoo Highway. And all of a sudden, they read this interview where Ray just tears them up. Now, did we agree with Ray? Oh, yeah. Would we have said it in print? No, probably not. And so they pulled our tour support right then. So there's our $14,000 a week tour support gone. And we have new management. We're signed with Tom Hewlett and Eddie Wenrick, who at the time were managing Warrant, was their big gun. And they're saying they're not paying tour support, that they are not going to do it. And as a matter of fact, they put out a little thing saying anyone that worked that Voodoo Highway record, they could get fired. And two people from New York offices for Atlantic got fired for working the record on their own time. I know for a fact they got fired because I know them. Wow. And so we're no tour support. So we put together our own tour. The band did. We basically hired a guy. I helped with it. We advanced the tour. We went out on our own, actually made money and did all that. But at that point, as soon as that happened, as soon as the record came out, they let that record go, but they pulled the first one. So that the first record all of a sudden became a cutout. So it's sitting there still selling, and now you can't, if your store ran out of it, you can't reorder it. It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. And so now, because we are not their favorites, we're never their favorite son, now we're really not their favorite son. They basically shelved our record, didn't work the second one. We kind of just did it on our own. They didn't care whether we went on tour. We wanted to go on tour. So we put our own tour together and had a booking agent, and we had other bands like when you saw us with Bang Tango and all that, but none of that stuff was done by the label. We were like persona non grata at the label at that point, and still to this day. And then they dropped us, which is great because we wanted to be dropped. Right. And we were never happy there. That was kind of something that just happened. They made a bunch of promises. Titanium, some of it came true. Titanium was owned by 4 people, Jason Flom being one of them, Paul O'Neill being one, Andy Sesher from Hit Parader was one. And we got a lot of press out of it because of it, but we were never happy with the label. We were never happy with Paul O'Neill's involvement with the band. We were never happy with what his production side of the record was. Jake, the good stuff you hear on that first record has nothing to do with Paul O'Neill. It has to do with what Jake's vision of it was and making the record sound the way that he wanted to make it sound. I mean, Paul wrote some lyrics here and there with Ray, but if you like that record, the guy that should get the production credit for that is Jake Lee, not Paul O'Neill. And again,
who exactly is Jason Flom?
He's the head of Atlantic Records. Now he is Atlantic Records.
Okay.
At the time, he was an A&R guy.
Okay.
Now he's the guy. And we are, I'm sure he doesn't think about us one time in the last 10 years, but those records are never coming out.
He's famous for
Skid Row.
But he's famous for not signing. He's famous for signing Skid Row. He's famous for not signing Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister got signed by the English Atlantic, who flew over to New York and signed him, and he's getting on the plane and he calls Jason Flom and says, I'm prepared to be wrong, but I feel like it's fairly well documented that this English president of Atlantic in England called Jason Flom, "Hey, I just signed Twisted Sister, and there's nothing you can do about it." But Jason Flom was not going to sign him, and they ended up on Atlantic anyway. But it was somewhere else. Jason Flom is famous for that.
He's the man in charge. He never liked us.
Yeah,
he never liked us from the get-go. He thought the musicianship was great, but he did not like the songs. He didn't like the direction. He didn't really like Dreams in the Dark when Jake and Ray wrote it. He would say, "I just don't hear it." He'd come down to the studio when we'd be recording and go, I don't hear it. I don't hear a song. He goes, "I don't hear any songs." And we'd be like, "Yeah, bite me. We like the songs." And unfortunately for Jason Flom, in the contract that we signed, we had right to creative control of what we did.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So we're getting ready to do the second Badlands record, and we're writing for it. And so they sent us $30,000 to go into a studio and record demos. Well, we took that 30 grand and we lived off of it. And Jake had a really, really nice professional series Walkman that you could record on, and he would record the rehearsals. And he sent that back to Atlantic, and they thought we recorded it at a real studio. And so they came out to hear our new great songs, right? And so what we did, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with this band called Captain Beyond from the 70s.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like fairly progressive.
Yeah.
So we would play some of their songs in soundcheck. So when they came out, Andy Session and Jason Flom came to hear our new songs at the rehearsal. We rehearsed at a place called Mates in North Hollywood.
Yeah.
He comes out to hear it. We start playing Dancing Madly Backwards and Mesmerization Eclipse by Captain Beyond. And we play, and they're both standing there, and these are not radio songs at all. And they're like looking at us with this look of abject terror, like, and they were like so shocked. And then Jake says, "Yeah, just kidding." And then we played them the last time or whatever. And it was actually probably good, because even if they didn't like the last time, they probably liked it a hell of a lot better than Dancing Madly Backwards, or Raging River of Fear. But it was,
you gave him something to compare it to. So, Captain Beyond versus a real Badlands song,
I can't imagine why they didn't like us.
Sound like you were kind of fucking with them a little bit anyway.
Well, they did it with, they screwed with us. We screwed with them. I mean, we would have interviews to do, and okay, Jake, you have a phoner at 6 o'clock in the morning with I'm not getting up for no 6 o'clock in the morning.
Fuck
phoner. Jimmy Page wouldn't get up for a 6 o'clock in the morning phoner, so I'm not. And I'd be like, "It's great, Jake's my roommate. I don't want to have to get up for a 6 o'clock phoner either."
Yeah.
Well, the Badlands records are very well respected, and as you say, if they were ever re-released and more widely available, I know people out there still want them and would love to have those, available. So
is it a matter of
let me interrupt. You want to know something? One of the reasons that it won't is because if it's sold X amount of units, we would recoup. The reason that we have no control of that is because we never recouped our recording advance. So if all of a sudden those records sold, we would recoup, and that would mean we paid back our debt. We now have control of the masters. Remember when the record got released in both records were released in England on some other funky label, and the reason it got pulled is because we didn't own the rights to put it out there. So they managed to get a hold of some of the masters. They released it. When Atlantic found out about it, they said, "You can't put this out. We didn't approve of this. They don't own the control of this."
So
now,
it's the recoupable rights. It's the recoupable right. Because it's not recouped is the clause in your contract.
Yep.
Wow. Because there's a couple of Shifty Jimmy kind of things you could have done. You could have re-recorded the albums and put them out on your own.
Without Ray being around.
Yeah. Right. I mean immediately after you got fucked.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You don't have that kind of foresight at the time. I mean,
of course.
People always say, how come there's not a Badlands reunion? Ray Gillen?
Yeah, there's no Ray, right.
I mean, it would be hard to do it. I mean, anyway, the most identifying thing of Badlands right off the first thing you're going to be identified with is Ray's voice.
That's
it's
right.
that way with every singer.
Yeah.
Or with every band with a singer. That's not, and you know, and of course what Jake does and everything else. But without Ray, I mean, Jake, and I don't want to speak for him. He's always said he would never do it, and unless he changes his mind. I mean, if Jake called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a Badlands reunion tour. We're going to get blah 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 to sing. You in? Yeah. What time we leaving? Yeah, I'm in. I mean,
Sure.
It's the biggest part of my legacy. I had a great time in it.
Yeah.
And Jake's my favorite guitarist.
Yeah.
And sure, I'd be interested. Do I think that's? Let me check my phone. No, he hasn't called today. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. But if Jake ever wanted to go do something that was revolved around something like that, and I'm sure it would not be called Badlands, but I don't know. It's his call, whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
He knows that, you know, he's asked me, would you ever do something like that?
Yeah.
Because that was his band, but it was also my band. And to me, you know what I mean? You know,
Right.
Was I main writer? No. Could I write songs with Jake? Sure. Will we? Yeah, maybe someday. I don't know. But
Well, you guys have fans. You guys made your mark. It was kind of a fucking super group.
Yeah, man.
Kind of square.
Except for that unknown bass player.
Well, I don't know. There's 3 of them with the same last name.
Yeah,
And they're all over the fucking place.
I know.
And they're killing it.
In Louisiana, there's probably even more of them. Chaisson's as common as the name Smith in Louisiana.
Oh, well, do they all play bass? That would be
Every single Chaisson in Louisiana plays the bass. It's really weird.
Oh, so you got you know, bass on. Just change it to bass on.
Well, my favorite bass player is Hiram Chaisson, who was the bass on player in Louisiana.
Okay. Well, listen, what's going on with Atomic Kings from here on out? Are you going to play? Are you going to do some kind of you know, week-long run? Or are you just kind of home basing it and kind of playing here, playing there, just wherever time allows? And what do you got?
Well, we have I'm supposed to find out tomorrow a show that we're supposed to be doing here in Phoenix at a place I always wanted to play called the Celebrity Theater. It's a theater in the round. It's a rotating stage.
Wow.
I saw Van Halen there and Sabbath and ZZ Top and Lizzie early in their careers. So it's a place, it's on my bucket list, so to speak. We have 2 shows coming up in September, one in Tucson, and then one here. We're going to open for Enough's Enough here.
Okay.
We have a show, I think, in November opening for Jeff Tate. That's still getting finalized. There's a guy trying to put together 3 or 4 shows in Florida for us, and also 5 shows between Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and 3 in Texas. That's still at kind of the planning stages. The way it kind of works is Ken, our singer, has a business. Jimmy has a business, and then Ryan and I both work at the guitar store. I run Bizarre Guitar and Drum in Phoenix. Shameless plug. And so it'd be really hard for us to drop everything and go out for more than a week. And especially at the store, because there's only 4 of us that work there. So if Ryan and I are gone for a week, that means the other 2 guys got to really kind of cover the duty. Now, would we do it? Yeah. And is it possible to? So yeah, we have a show supposedly sometime this summer in Vegas, and a potential show in LA. Our record company is a smaller record company, which is what we wanted because we had complete control of everything that we did. And he's very supportive. Tonehouse Records, great label to be on for us. We have complete creative control. But because of that, no one's, you know, Ken said, the singer said, hey, we need to get a manager. And I said, and exactly what would we be offering a manager? There's no record company money, and we're not going on tour for 3 months. So exactly what would a manager be getting? What's his payback for that? The fact that he gets to say he manages Atomic Kings, woohoo! So,
yeah.
I mean, so any manager that has any kind of clout would want to have, you know, would I like to go do a rockin' cruise? Yeah, sure. I've never done one. Are we big enough to do a rockin' cruise? Probably not. probably my resume alone isn't enough to do it, and we don't play any Badlands songs.
Right.
And would I go play Rocklahoma? I don't think I want to play Wednesday afternoon at noon. You know,
Right.
that's where we'd be. So there are things that we would go do, and the record has been really successful. I don't know what the CD. We've sold a whole. We're on like the 6th printing of the CD.
Excellent.
So we've sold 4,000 or 5,000 CDs.
That's
which
fucking great.
in the market when there's no one that buys CDs. I mean, one of the reasons you buy it is because it's autographed by all of us and all that. And I sell them in the store. We just sold out of the store. I had 100 on site in the store 2 weeks ago. We just sold out of the last one yesterday. I got another box coming. So
Fantastic.
it is selling, and you can get it on all streaming sites. You can get a downloaded copy on tonehouserecords.com. You can get a hold of me and get an autographed copy if you want to find me on Facebook, or go on our Facebook page, Atomic Kings. And we do sell all that stuff on there, T-shirts and merch and all that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons we would go do shows is because I think we could sell some CDs and merch at some of these shows. And so our fee to go play wouldn't be so exorbitant, because we would be able to, the response to the record has been so great. And don't get me wrong, I like it too. But the fact that people seem to really have found something in it that makes them gravitate towards it. It's getting a lot of celestial radio play, and even some real radio play in certain places. And so it is a good record. And so I'm proud of it and everything. And I would love to go play live with it. I mean, I'd love to go play some shows with you, but whether we could afford to do it, I'll tell you, we just went to New Mexico to play a show with King's X. We drove all the way out there, and it was such a foobar that we didn't get to play. So we had 50 people coming out from Arizona, from New Mexico, from Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska, in New Mexico, came to see us play. King's X stage manager and sound man wouldn't allow us to use the PA. They said, you can play, you can't use the PA. And you can't set up on stage. You have to set up on this asphalt right here with no PA.
But why would they? What's the point? Why would they?
Because they didn't want to redo the board. They only had one board there. Now, King's X, as far as I know, didn't know anything about it, or they knew about it this much. Hey, it'd be like this. Hey, Greg, you're in Badlands. The opening band, we're not going to let them have a sound check. Yeah, I don't care. Do whatever. I'm busy thinking about Badlands stuff. So I could see where if Doug Pinnick knew about it, it's probably, yeah, whatever. You deal with it. I'm Doug Pinnick. I'm writing a song here, or I don't feel good, or whatever. I want to get some sleep. Fine. I don't care. So we drove out there with all of our own gear, 6 hours or 8 hours with the trailer, got there in time for our load in. We hung around with not being able to even set up on stage. We were told our set was supposed to run from 7 to 10 after 8. We were the only other band on the bill. And we were supposed to be able to play there that as long as we were off stage by 8:30. The promoter brought us in, paid us our advance, and then eventually paid us the full amount. Wasn't a great amount of money, but it was enough money for us to go, because we would have sold merch and CDs and all that. King's X's road manager and sound man said, we're not going to redo the, and here's the bullshit part. They had an automated board. They could have easily put their stuff in and then re-automated it, let us do a minimal amount of stuff in sound check. So they didn't even get done their sound check. We're supposed to be off stage by 8:10. They got done their sound check at 8.
Yeah.
So we drove all the way out there to do this show. Now, we made a lot of new fans, and we talked to a lot of people there, and people were very sympathetic, and there's other promoters that want to bring us back to Albuquerque, and we were more than down for that. But that's the kind of shit you run into when you don't have any machine behind you. So, right. I mean, is Atomic Kings a great band? If I don't mind saying so, yeah, I'll play with anyone. I don't care. I'll open or close. It doesn't matter to me. I know none of the guys in my band are kids. They're all around your age, except Ryan, who's like a baby. He's like 50 years old, big baby. And, here I am. I'll be 70 here in like 6 weeks. So
amazing.
It's like having your kid in the band with you.
Yeah.
So, Ryan is like one of my best friends. So it's awesome. Great having his younger perspective to kind of hear how he does stuff, and it works really good. But because we don't have any machinery to promote what it is we do other than the record company, and they're not our manager, and they make sure the record's available and it's out there and all that.
Yeah.
But, we have a limited advertising budget and all that. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to try to find an actual publicist. We've never actually had one. So we're actually on the hunt for a publicist. If any of you are available, get a hold of Greg Chaisson on Facebook.
Well, I'm in 100 bands and I don't have a manager. So that should shed some light on the discussion here.
I like the Joe Bonamassa method, where you're everything. You're the record company, you're the booking agency, you're your accountant, but you got to have some kind of something that makes savoir faire, that makes you want to be part of that. So because we don't have that kind of money that we can do all that stuff, and because we can't go on the road for a long period of time, it makes it difficult. So fly-in dates, yeah, sure, I'm there. That's Greg Chaisson. And then, whatever else, drive to Nevada or New Mexico or even Texas for 3 or 4 shows, or go to San Diego and then do LA. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't have those connections. So I could see where a manager would come in handy, and to book that sort of thing. So maybe that's something I have to get more involved in. I mean, our shows that we are doing in Tucson, Ken's a real go-getter. He's kind of facilitating that. I kind of had the connection for the one we didn't get to do in New Mexico, which was really sucked because we would have kicked some serious ass in Albuquerque, but we didn't get to go. So,
well, hopefully that turns around because, it is a good record. Atomic King's self-titled album. Available on tonehouserecords.com. If you're interested in being Greg's publicist, you can find him on Facebook.
Or if you're incredibly rich and you want to adopt me, or just be my benefactor, I'm down for that. Hey, nothing kinky, but
fair enough.
Well, Greg, we really appreciate your time today, man. What a great story. So much history. I think we learned a lot about you today, and I didn't know about your time in Legs Diamond until about a minute before we got on the call today. So that was interesting for me as a San Antonio guy. And we wish you all the luck with Atomic Kings, man. It's a great sounding record. People should check it out, tonehouserecords.com. And hopefully we'll see you on the road. We'd love to see you in Texas, I know that. And I'm sure other people would love to see you around the country as well. So on behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with our guest today, Greg Chaisson of Atomic Kings.